to what we're presenting you with, and we will have moments throughout this for you to do that. Our intention is to start a conversation here. And so what we're asking you to do is to be open to what we're presenting and stay with us throughout the presentation. So if you are excited and curious about what we are about to present to you, go ahead and post, type yes in the chat to tell us that you are here, you are open, and you are ready. All right, Laura, thank you. Thank you. All right.
Yes, from Elaine.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes, from Monty.
I love the enthusiasm.
Here, open and ready. Yes.
Fantastic. So while you are affirming your interest in being here and your excitement to learn, I just want to officially welcome you. I am Adrienne Fikes. I am on the board of ICF Metro DC chapter. I want to welcome you to our second webinar for International Coaching Week 2020. So on behalf of the entire ICF Metro DC board, Jim Sims, our president, I thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. I want to also welcome you on behalf of a very special group of people, a group of volunteers who have been working to shape this week for our chapter since November of 2019. And that seems like forever ago today. Yeah. But we started in November planning the DC Mega Mixer. And unfortunately, although that happy hour has been canceled due to COVID-19, we wanted to acknowledge not only the participants within our chapter, but also the cross collaboration that we built with other professional associations like AGRA, Metro ATD, DC SHRM, HRSPGC, Nova SHRM, WATRA, and the staff at Lost Society DC. So we're hoping we'll bring the Mega Mixer back to you in 2021, but we're excited that we were able to still offer these 3 webinars. So I also want to give a particular shout out. You've met Joyce, you've met Marlo, you've met Lee. I want to also acknowledge Sterling Brinson and Gary Crane, who is actually our incoming president for the DC chapter. Joyce, Marlo, Sterling, Lee, and Gary have had tremendous input into what's happening today. This ICF Metro DC celebration of International Coaching Week would not have happened without all of their enthusiasm and support. So every piece of value that you get out of this week is all thanks to this amazing group of people.
That is led by the wonderful Adrienne Fikes. She hates to put herself in there. But Joyce and I are always like, no, pause for a moment. Thank you, Adrienne, for your leadership and keeping us on track.
Listen, teamwork makes the dream work. There's no way I could have done this without you. So I am so thrilled to have had the opportunity and the pleasure to work with all of you. As a board member for Metro DC, I also want to take just a moment to remind you that it is time, as you think about the conversation we're having, the value you got out of the panels that will be happening this week, it's time to renew your membership. So if you are not a member, we welcome all of the members and guests from all across the country and the world where you are joining us from. But we want to encourage you to think about renewing your membership to our chapter and renewing your membership to the association. And you can go to icfmetrodc.org to take care of all of that logistics. This chapter is a place where you will find community, education, and service. And we think that today will be no departure from that. It will be a demonstration of the value that our association and being a membership of this community will bring to you. So I also wanted to touch the lineup for the week. Yesterday, we had a tremendous conversation about the business of coaching. Today, we are talking about principled struggle. And tomorrow there will be a panel discussion on assessments. That panel is Wednesday at 11 a.m. And again, you can go to icfmetrodc.org to register for that if you are not already. So now that is all the logistics. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And now I'm going to toss it back over to Joyce to tell you about why we're here.
Yes, so again, thank you, everybody. It is such a pleasure to be here, and especially to host this with Adrienne and Malo. Adrienne, like she said, we put a lot of work into this, and I wanted to kick it off and try to bring some context and structure to what we're going to be sharing today. So the reason why we put this wonderful webinar together is it's probably going to, as we spend this time together, it's going to be two pieces of this. We're going to learn about this powerful concept called principled struggles, which was created by Tanya Lee. And Tanya Lee has spent over 30 years actually working on social justice issues. So she created this, and what it does, it's going to deepen the collective understanding, and also how does it achieve greater unity. And also in this webinar, we will explore how this concept can transform the way that we set the foundation, co-create the relationship, communicate effectively, and facilitate our learning and results. So as Adrienne mentioned, obviously be open, and we are really looking forward to such a wonderful conversation with you all this afternoon. So Adrienne, I think I'm going to toss it back to you, and you could provide some of the definitions.
Awesome. And you reminded me that hopefully all of our good ICF coaches recognize that we are talking about coaching competencies, the ICF competencies, and Lee has just informed us that this session does qualify for CCU units, so you will be getting an email from Lee after this session for your certificate for participating with us today. So principled struggle, what is this? As Joyce mentioned, it was created by a Black feminist. She works with an organization called Left Roots, and she has created this framework, and Tanya Lee created this framework that includes a central idea that our struggle must be for the sake of deepening our collective understanding, and it achieves greater unity. So we're actually going to attempt to practice principled struggle as we learn about principled struggle in this session today. And so while we are learning, we're going to be vulnerable, we're going to celebrate our mistakes, we are going to be better for it. So the first concept of principled struggle is that we are going to be honest and direct while holding compassion. That means being honest and direct for each other, as well as honest and direct with yourself. So we're going to be honest and direct while holding compassion. You may notice someone that you perceive is in conflict with what you think or what you believe, or something that has harmed you in some way. We are going to hold space, but we're going to hold space with compassion. And what's interesting is, we were very intentional about not using the term safe space, because we want to recognize the courageousness that it takes just to enter this conversation. It may be courageous, it may not necessarily feel safe, but we want you to know that we are doing this for the sake of love, and moving through the conflict and moving through the disagreement into a reframe where we get into a space where we can talk about love and compassion and healing. And as coaches, I know that that is something that we all agree with. So we are going to, being honest and direct while holding compassion means we are going to be compassionate as quickly as we can be, as deeply as we can be. And again, we're going to do it for the sake of love that we have for ourselves, as well as for everyone else. The second is to take responsibility for your own feelings. The people who may have harmed you are not in the world. The people who may have harmed you in the world are not necessarily here in this circle with us today. They may or they may not be. We are acknowledging that there has been conflict. We are acknowledging there has been disagreement. But we're going to lean into the concepts of principled struggle, again, going back to honest and direct while holding compassion while we move through this process. So we are also going to seek deeper understanding. We ask to read. We're going to ask and read first. So if you are unclear about something that's happening, if you are challenged by a concept, before we push away, we're going to invite ourselves to learn more and to explore before we decide that this is in fact conflict, okay? And then we are going to consider that this meeting, this gathering, this circle, this moment that we're in today may or may not be the container to hold what you need to bring. So as this brings up questions, as this brings up comments, as this brings up feelings, as this brings up sidebar conversations, we're going to invite you to think about whether or not this is the appropriate place. Again, this is the beginning of the conversation, not the end of the conversation. And the way that we practice the fourth concept is a quick check-in. If you are having a side conversation, if you have checked out emotionally or mentally in this session, we're going to ask you if the thoughts and feelings you are having is something that you could bring back to the larger group. And if this is not, if it's not something that you could bring back to the group to help us get to better understanding, then it's something that we'll ask you to put in your own personal parking lot, so to speak, and deal with that at another time. So we're going to help us get better and build us up. We're not breaking each other down, okay? And so as we move through what may be conflict, we are staying with it, sticking with it to get to justice, to healing, and equity. And so we are being accountable to each other for the lifelong learning that we are having together. And so this is principled struggle. So as you think about these concepts, let's toss it back to Joyce and give you some more information about another definition that will help us with our conversation today. Joyce?
Yeah, thank you, Adrienne. That was great. So the next concept that we are going to define is the restorative justice. And the restorative justice is actually a theory that emphasizes repairing harm that has been caused by a crime and a conflict. It places the decisions in the hands of those that have been affected the most by the wrongdoing. But it also, what is really powerful about it, it also gives equal concern to the victim, to the offender, and actually the community at the surrounding community. Restorative justice, it's meant for us to, as Adrienne is sharing, to be more positive, repair the harm, heal the broken relationships, and most important probably is also address the underlying reasons for why a crime or conflict might have taken place. Again, we come back, we always talk about accountability, and restorative justice actually looks at both the individual and all of us as a collective body and holds all of us accountable for that. So, that is how we are going, as we talk through this conversation, keep these definitions in mind to allow us to be able to have a great conversation and obviously, answer any questions that you all may have. So Adrienne, you can go ahead. You want to define racial equity as well?
Certainly. Okay, so the final definition we're going to share with you today is racial equity. The definition is the systematic fair treatment of people of all races, resulting in equitable opportunities and outcomes for all. So sometimes racial equity is called racial justice, and it goes beyond anti-racism. So it's really talking about beyond absence of discrimination and inequities, but it's the presence of deliberate systems and supports to achieve and sustain racial equity through proactive and preventative measures. And the reason So racial equity is about access, equal access, and outcomes, and that we are deliberately looking at the systems that are put in place that are creating inequities, and we are introducing interventions in other systems, new policies, new ways of being that are intentional about creating equity instead of just hoping that it happens. And so they're having me quote myself here. So we want to see the impact from the marginalized perspective, not our own. So what we're attempting to do today is to center the voice that has not been centered and really look at the work that we do from this perspective, okay? And so, Joyce, here we go.
Yes. So yes, thank you, Adrienne. That was a beautiful quote, by the way. And again, we're talking about hearing the voices of from a marginalized community, and we thought of, you know, showing this video. It's a video by Song, and Song is the Sultans of New Grounds. That's what it's called. We want to actually be able to. We want the marginalized communities to speak for themselves. We are going to show you how this video and discuss your reactions to it, because this is where you guys come in, and please share. Please use the chat to share your reactions to the video. The organization Song, again, their mission is it's the home of the LGBTQ liberation across all lines. And again, like Adrienne shared, it goes about race, it talks about class, abilities, age, culture, and gender, and sexuality in the South. They were built to sustain and connect a Southern regional base of the LGBTQ people in order to transform that region through strategic projects and campaigns developed in response to the current conditions in our communities. Again, Song builds this movement through leadership development, intersectional analysis, and organization. So the video you're actually going to see is the mandate song from Song. It was a call and response that was recorded with a Black Lives Matter, and it was actually recorded in 2016. It's not that old. So, excuse me, it's not that old. 2016, and it's a short video. And what we are asking you all to do is, again, you know, be open, and how do these issues of this community is facing show up in our clients. And then after this video, we will open it up to others to share their opinions and their reactions to the video. And obviously, you're also welcome to speak on the chat. So Lee, I'm not gonna mess this up. So Lee, I think you're, please.
And while Lee is doing that, I'm just going to throw out a couple of rules of engagement to help provide structure for us as we go through and watch the video and react, correct? Am I, or do you want to not do that? Looking at Adrienne's face.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so just remember, in keeping in line with what Adrienne and with Joyce has said, to be open, just to have the Aretha principle, to be respectful, recognizing that people have different opinions. It doesn't mean that we have to agree, but there is a way to express that. And then lastly, to do what's in, I call it bid, what's in the best interest of the discussion. So that we are all in this together. We're celebrating and providing resources for us as coaches engaging in principle struggle. That's it.
Awesome.
Okay, let's go. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
All across the nation, from Baton Rouge to Asheville to Minnesota, Black bodies and police violence is showing that this country is crushing under the weight of white supremacy. Black leadership, y'all said to us, every generation has a demand, and you're right, we do. Here's what it is: divest from prisons, jails, courts. The vision of justice for us does not include cages. walk in our communities with safety and dignity for all Black people, those that are differently able, Black women, Black children, queer bodies, trans women, all of our brilliance deserve that. That is public safety. So whoever's defining it, come talk to us, because we have a different vision. Get behind it or get beside us. And the organizations and the communities and the people we represent. We just getting ready. We just getting ready. And to all of our people who are listening, all of the people across the country right now, all of our people in solidarity right now, from Canada to South Africa, all of our people in Palestine right now, this is a different moment that we are in. We have a mandate. We have a mandate. And damn it, we gonna do it. Call and response. 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 The mandate for Black people in this time. The mandate for Black people in this time. Is to avenge the suffering of our ancestors. Is to avenge the suffering of our ancestors. To earn the respect of future generations. To earn the respect of future generations. And be willing to be transformed in the service of the work. And be willing to be transformed in the service of the work.
All right. So let's go ahead and feel free to take a moment and enter into the chat your whatever. What was your response? What was your response to this video? Wow. Okay. Okay. If you have questions, if you have comments, like, go ahead and take a minute, and we want your authentic response. And while you're sharing that, Marlo, if you can monitor the chat, I will talk for a moment about my response to this video. So I was introduced to Southerners on New Ground from my daughter. She is an active member of this group. And when she showed me this video, I had a range of emotions. As a coach that is working for transformation, that is in the business of dignity and humanity for all people of every kind, it hit me. Every time I see this video, I have an emotional reaction to what I'm seeing, because it was shocking. I felt some fear. I felt some just excitement. I felt concern. And so there were all these emotions coming up for a variety of reasons. But I really wanted to think about the people in that video and the voices that we as a coaching community don't always get to hear from when we are in the spaces where we do our work, whether we are working with an individual or we are working with a corporation or we are working with a community. You know, these are voices that we don't get to hear. And what we want to continue to explore is what impact those voices are having. So Marlo, I see that the chat is moving. If you can share a bit.
Oh, okay. Awesome. So, hold on, let me go back up. Tracy said, I think I have that right. Yeah, Tracy said she's quoting, "to be willing to be transformed in the service of work." That really resonated with her. And Laura shared that she's very aware of the amount of pain that is unimaginable to her in her white skin. And Dr. Saya says that they wanted their voice to be heard. Coaches are in the business of transformation, Carolyn says, and Ellen says that strong and powerful, a sense of defiance of the status quo. And Linda says that song is new to her. She's super curious to learn more. People, someone also asked, is the link to the video going to be shared if it was public?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Ayana, again, very brave. There's so much power in this. Thanks for sharing. Terry raised a point. I've seen similar things for 50 years, so why has nothing changed? Struck by the I was struck immensely by the lady leader's voice and her call for action, said Manny or Mani. How must it feel to live a life where you need to demand to be treated with dignity in your neighborhood, said Daria. It illustrates the passion of people, said Sandra. Just powerful and a little scary, Jennifer Copeland says. I can appreciate that, yeah. Very curious to learn more about song. See the pain from which the energy that could be perceived as anger has evolved, Karen said. It made me think of how much courage it took to put this together, said Mary. Seriousness of the purpose was evident in their faces. I wanted more, said Toya. I couldn't help but notice the faces of the Black officers confronting the group. One woman had her head down. I almost wanted to sit quietly and talk with them about where we are the same. It is probably many more similarities than differences. You guys are so smart.
Yeah.
They're just genius. Wow.
Yes.
Why has nothing changed, said Tracy. I just had chills go down my spine. Yes. Reflective, R. Simmons said, just the word diverging was powerful. Mm-hmm. Monica is a nonprofit leader in the social justice space and a coach on the side. I saw those that I stand beside, the struggle that has transformed me and the people who are still putting themselves on the front lines as 80% of the COVID illnesses in DC are in the Black community. So a lot of perspective there, Joyce and Adrienne.
Absolutely, and thank you all for sharing your perspectives. And we're going to continue to talk about this. So, but we wanted to not just show their faces, we not just hear from their voices. We really wanted to hear from someone within this community that is actively doing this work. And so we are tremendously honored and excited to have Charlene A. Caruthers. She is the author of a book, Unapologetic, a Black, Queer, and Feminist Mandate for Radical Movements. And so we're going to invite Charlene to join us and to speak a bit for a minute. And if you could go right back up to the reaction of the video, I want to introduce her by introducing the first chapter of this book is called All of Us or None of Us. And she begins with a quote from the Combahee River Collective. Somebody talked about it's been 50 years, nothing has changed. She brings that struggle forward and she talks about the Combahee River Collective. And this quote says, this focusing upon our own oppression is embodied in the concept of identity politics. We believe that the most profound and potentially most radical politics come directly out of our own identity. If Black women were free, it would mean that everyone else would have to be free, since our freedom would necessitate the destruction of all the systems of oppression. So we are excited to welcome Charlene A. Caruthers. I am hoping that she has joined us, Lee, and that we can bring her on now.
She's not on yet, but
okay.
I will let you know.
Okay, so she is not on. So as she comes on, we will continue. So this is her book. She's going to come on and share a little bit about it. But we wanted to, part of the reason why we wanted to have her on is to really talk about the real work that is happening in these spaces. There was a comment about I wanted more. I couldn't help but notice the faces of the Black officers confronting the group. You know, as coaches, many times we are not in grassroots organizations. We are, you know, we may work for nonprofits, but oftentimes we're working with business leaders. We're working with people who have at least a level of comfort to be able to even hire a coach or to have the resources that a coach is provided for them. But it makes me think of how the work that we are doing and the work our clients are doing is impacting the voices that we never hear from. And so I think it was a brilliant example of the officers that were confronting this group and the conflict, again, that arose. And when you think about the concepts of principled struggle, what that might look like for a Black woman who is a police officer to be confronting these group of activists, you know, what might that conversation look like if they were to sit quietly and talk about the differences and how we're the same, and really working towards a space where our intention was dignity and humanity instead of oppression, instead of authority, instead of, you know, all of the other exchange, conflict and disagreement that we see sometimes. And so clients show up to these spaces. Since Charlene has not joined us, we're going to go ahead on with our conversation. And when she arrives, Lee will let us know, and we're going to, you know, shift to what she would like to share with us.
We have a couple of questions, Adrienne. Do you want them now?
Let's go ahead.
One is, will this PowerPoint be made available?
Yes, it will.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the other question is from Manny, I apologize for chopping your name. This is a US-centric view or a global struggle?
Yeah,
that's a great question. It is centered in, well, this, and it's not just US, you know, part of the reason why we featured Southerners on New Ground was to really make it local. And so this is a group that is across the South. They are in Georgia, they are in North Carolina, they are in Alabama. I know they just started a chapter in Virginia. So they are really looking at life for marginalized communities within the South. At the same time, the issues that they are combating are certainly national issues. And as we'll talk a little bit about towards the end of this session, they are also global issues. So when we are talking about dignity and humanity, that's a global issue. And it shows up differently for different people.
Yeah. And Adrienne, if I might jump in, and thank you, Manny, for that question. And yes, it is. So I have, my specialty is in international NGOs. I've worked with international NGO for the last 20 years. And as Adrienne is sharing, this concept of humanity and conflict is a concept that we even in the nonprofit space, and I think Monica too had shared that, because we work with organizations that are not even maybe domestically, and they're all over the world. I've worked with, you know, clients like in Colombia, where there's a lot of conflict there. I mean, obviously in Africa, there's a lot of humanitarian assistance that goes into those countries. So, you know, we wanted to open this up because, and obviously, yes, you know, bring it from a local context because, you know, that's where we're operating now. But again, if you look at it from a global context, this is principled struggle can be applied even in those international contexts, conversations, or if you have clients that are in that space of international NGOs and international development. So,
Roz,
that was a great question.
Yeah, absolutely, Joyce. And Roz just summed it up. Manny said, thank you for answering. She wanted to broaden the conversation, so he or she appreciates it. And then Roz said the oppression, thank you, Manny, I'm so sorry. The oppression of marginalized communities happens all over the world.
Yes.
Roz said, so very well stated, yes.
Mm-hmm. And so Marlo, can you share a bit about how this is related to the work that we do as coaches?
Sure, absolutely. So when, our clients show up to meetings and, they're carrying special rights or advantages or, immunities granted by the issues or injury. And so as coaches, we need to be able to support them. And so I'm struggling because this is really embarrassing to share this story.
See, this is where it gets tough. We all committed to be vulnerable.
So for all of you who are watching this and can see my face, and I'm just being extra vulnerable here. We said that we were going to be real, so we're going to be real. So Miss Coach here, was on a diversity panel, and on that panel, and the diversity panel was, people tend to think of diversity in terms of the hue of your skin. Oh, Saved by the Bell.
Yay!
Marla,
we're coming back to your story. So 2 things. First of all, we want to welcome Charlene. We are excited that she's here. So what we are going to do is we're going to put a pin in Marlo's question, because Marlo was telling a story and we couldn't see your face. So we're going to make sure we turn your video on, so when you tell the story, everybody gets to see your beautiful face and the beautiful smile you have as you're trying to get through this. But with no further ado, Charlene, how are you?
Hi, my apologies. I was helping my niece with her homework, just to be completely honest with you.
Listen, it's the new way of living for the moment.
Yes.
So, Charlene, you have been queued up. We have introduced your book. We have shown the song video. We have talked about the mandate. We have responded to the video. So we want to welcome you in this space, and we want to hear from you about how your work with principled struggle is happening in the movement spaces that you are working with.
Awesome. Well, first, thank you so much for having me and for the invitation. I just hope that everyone is doing the best that they can, because I think that's what we're all trying to do, the best that we can in this particular moment, and sending love to everyone who is struggling in whatever way that you may be struggling right now. For me, I'm actually, today, the Working Families Party is having like this, not day long, but two half days of a convening that was supposed to happen in person. And in Tanya Lee, we're actually on the same call, like right now. We're on a break. The whole thing is on a break. And so for me, I always go back to Tanya's work. She was the first person who ever even shared the words principal struggle with me in life ever. And she I consider her to be a comrade and also a friend. And I think it's also important to know that in Tanya and how I see my work is situated within a lineage, right? It's situated in a lineage of things, and that those of us living today are building on the things that have come before us. So one of the primary ways that principal struggle comes into play when it comes to my work is being really clear about the ground in which I work, on top of, inside of, alongside of, and that I'm building. And that is ground that is deeply troubled. It's ground that has been solidified. It's ground that has also been fortified through generative conflict. And so in my day-to-day organizing and work, principal struggle means always situating myself within a community of people, so that the work that we have been called to do, or the work that we have chosen to do, remains in the center of it. And that work includes us, right, as individuals, because individuals make up the collective. Like, there's no way to have a collective with just a bunch of like unshaped blobs of beings. And so it's about being clear about our purpose, who and whose we are, where we come from, and being willing to have courageous conversations. And frankly, that doesn't always happen. And courageous conversations aren't just, just dropping bombs into a conversation just because you feel like saying something that you want to say. But it's about even grounding things in asking questions and being authentic or honest about my feelings and where I'm coming from. And as laid out in Principal Struggle, that actually I'm responsible for my feelings. No one else is. And that what I may or may not be experiencing is actually not necessarily dependent on what someone else may or may not be experiencing. So for me, as someone who has been in a position to help support other people in their leadership development, and my understanding of the work that you all do, it is a task that often is met with in a tender setting, or with vulnerability. And I think that although vulnerability and being tender is a marker of openness, I also think that it's a possibility for us to practice the kind of like broader world and society that we want to live in. And so if we want to live in a world where patriarchy or racial capitalism, ableism, transphobia, homophobia, misogyny, all these things do not exist, then how we work with each other, it has to be reflected in how we work with each other. And that to me is Principal Struggle. It's about recognizing that, hey, actually the rest of the world isn't how I would like it to be, but I'm going to show up with you in the way that I want the rest of the world to be. And that's something that I consistently aspire to embody in my work. And I think in being in a position where people are entrusted with other people, right? With be it their work, be it with their emotional wellness or emotional fortitude or consciousness, their professional development, all of those things, that we have the opportunity to practice the things that we want to see out in the world. And that means a lot of fumbling. Miriam Kaba and Shira Hassan authored a workbook called Fumbling Towards Repair. And it's about transformative justice. And in that, there's so much fumbling that happens. There's so much fumbling that is going to happen. And to try as best as you can to give yourself grace in trying to exercise Principal Struggle, and to also create opportunities for grace for other people. Yeah.
You got a couple of people saying they are loving what you are saying. One person in particular, Charlene, said she loves this. The rest of the world isn't the way I want it to be, but I'm going to show up with you the way I want the world to be. So she loves that, appreciates it definitely. They're trying to see your face, so but people are enjoying what you're saying thus far. Just wanted to throw that out to you.
Oh, can you all not see me?
So I'm not sure. I'm going to ask Lee to see if she can. She's technically working on that.
Yeah, she's working on
it. Some other people are saying that they can see you, so it may be
their computer. How
people have formatted their own Zoom setting. Okay. And I wish I could help with that. So Charlene, can you give us some concrete examples of how and when you used Principal Struggle in the work that you do?
For sure. So I talk about it a little bit in the book, but there have been multiple instances where there's been a conflict, right? And the conflict, it ranges from like degree of people involved in like difficulty in actually confronting those problems. So things from, you didn't show up to a meeting and you said you were going to show up to things such as like, you physically harmed me. Someone was physically or sexually violated. And all of those things for me I remember, I can remember many times where what it looked like was not grounding my reaction in just what I thought should happen, but actually grounding my reaction in what is our goal here. Our goal here is to contribute to the long-term struggle for Black liberation. So it can't simply be what I want, what this other person wants, even specifically just what the person who, because it's oftentimes it's not as neat as like who was harmed and who did the harming. It's not always that simple in situations of conflict. But taking the time to listen has been very important. And then to also even ask people, what does it look like to be in allyship or solidarity or to support you in this particular moment? Because I've had to do that and found out that I didn't do it when I didn't, you know, I feel like I've even learned more when I wasn't showing up principally. Like when I showed up in a meeting and I didn't ask the questions and I just made assumptions. I feel like there's more learning in when I got it wrong than when I got it right. So there are lots of instances like in situations of conflict where we've had to sit down and just like go through a conversation, not for agreement, but for understanding.
Awesome. And so I was listening to an interview you did on your book tour, and you also mentioned that you had worked with a coach,
Right.
which I thought was, of course, exciting. What would you say to this group, an association of professional coaches, about what you would like us to begin thinking about, or what the invitation you would extend to us as we are introducing this concept and beginning to explore it in our role?
I would say consider how your work, if you don't already, consider how your work might be a part of the long-term struggles towards collective liberation, if you don't do so already. And like, how do you see your work as political? And when I say political, it's like your values being enacted out in the world. And the world means your home, it means in your community, it means in your workplace, it means where you're educated, where you receive healthcare, all of those things. Is it how can the work that you do be, how can it contribute to collective liberation in the long term? And that means that it's, in my view, that it's a lifelong commitment, and that all of our paths don't have to be the same. They don't have to be the same. And that they can all at the same time contribute to collective liberation. And what I mean by that is people being able to live within their full dignity, and for us to be in right relationship with each other and the land and the other living beings that exist on this earth with us.
Thank you. And we've got a couple of quick questions from the participants.
Okay, so let's see.
The last two.
Can coaching contribute to liberation in the long term? That was a great question. And then, can you address interracial coaching do's and don'ts?
Okay,
Please.
let me start with the second one. I have a greater sense of that. How can it contribute to liberation? I can speak for me, in my experience with coaching, is that my coach brought out of me what I was afraid to bring out of myself, or what I didn't see for myself. And not what a therapist could do. Someone who was like, when the coach is there to help you, as how I understand it, to help me become the strongest player that I can possibly become, and can tell me what muscles I need to exercise more frequently, what kind of player I'm being, how I can best show up on game day, and teaching me like how to practice, so that when game day comes, when those moments come, that I show up as the best player I can possibly show up as. And so if you do that with people who are doing social change work, the impact of that is exponential. Because many people doing this work, in my experience, they have fears just like everyone else. May not believe in like all the possibilities, may hold themselves back, may not see the openings or the muscles that they could better organize. And that's what the coach is there to do. And when it comes to leaders in social movements, you're not just impacting that person, you're impacting everyone that they work with. So that's how I'd answer that question. And interracial coaching do's and don'ts, I really think that varies depending on the relationship. But I think at the core of it is being as honest and forthcoming about power dynamics as possible. And if you're clear about the role of power, and that goes across interracial coaching, gender, different genders, different ages, faith, geography, citizenship, all those things, that you have to be clear about the power, that the different levels and types of power that people are bringing into the room, and to be aware of that, and to not use your positional power based on a particular group that you belong to in a way that either erases, ignores, or smothers out the very real conditions or experiences that the person you're coaching is actually contending with. And
thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, and if, say, you're like, I don't know, coaching a white cisgender man, it's like, hey, also don't give that person an opportunity to slide when you know that if they're bringing you a challenge, bringing a challenge to you that actually is like, hey, what you're doing here is exercising your power as a white cisgender man. Like, don't stray away from that as well.
Thank you. So I just wanted to share I definitely want to respect your time. I just wanted to share, Charlene, Monica says, while you're speaking, I'm struck by the need for us to slow down and actually connect and question. And someone also says, powerful answer, Charlene. Thank you so much. So we are going to shift the conversation directly. You set us up beautifully. Thank you so much. We're going to start talking about how this concept of principled struggle relates directly to our ICF professional competencies.
Mm-hmm.
You are more than welcome to hang out with us. I understand that you also have another call. We want to thank you again for joining us, and just say it was an absolute pleasure to hear from you. We are sharing with everyone is saying thank you in the comments. We will be sharing a link where people can grab your book and continue to explore the concepts. I've read it, and I've got like notes and all of this. This is very powerful. Thank you for writing that book. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before you go?
Sure. I just saw a question about identity in the comment.
Yeah.
I think it's important, or the chat, and I think it's important to address that. I don't believe that any effort for collective liberation or individuals involved in that work are ever identity neutral. Even if you look at the people right now who are protesting at the state capitals across the country, they have identities. So they all have identities. The president of the United States has an identity. He is white, he's a man, and sometimes he's a Christian, I suppose. And he is also a very wealthy person. And so for our movements, to me, identity is always present. What is important is what are your values, and how are your values informed by your identity, your experiences, because identity is never enough. I can't, like, me just saying I'm a Black woman doesn't tell you anything about what I believe in. Me telling you that I'm a Black woman who is a feminist, a Black radical feminist, can tell you more about what I believe in. And even more importantly, you want to know what I do and how I am with other people. So no to, I don't think we need to move beyond identity. I think we need to get sharper around how our identity and our experiences impact our values and in turn impact our actions.
Thank you.
That's it. And thank you so much
Mind
for having me.
blown.
Thank you so much for having me. I wish I had more time with you all, but thank you.
I'm so glad that you don't, because I don't want you to hear my story next. So
you know what, we're definitely not, you know, kicking you out. If you would like to, we're going to circle back around to your book in a few minutes. You can hang out with us if you'd like. We understand if you need to go. Okay.
I'm gonna hop off, unfortunately.
Not a problem. We were thrilled to have you. Thank you so much.
Y'all
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a great afternoon. And so, Marlo, you know,
you're having too much fun with it.
You know what? I love it. I love it. I would think that her concepts, the way that Charlene laid it out, really accomplished what your story would have.
And there is no need for me to share that because of what she did. I agree.
Unless it was on your heart.
No.
Okay.
It was great.
So let's, you know, we
moving right along.
We've shared so much, and I want to continue to invite people to post in the chat, responses, reactions, questions. Oh, Daria is saying, no, Marlo, we want your story. So,
and Roz, I thought you guys were my peeps. I've been managing the chat so well. They're like, no, we want to hear it.
So let's talk a bit about principled struggle and the ICF competencies. So, you know, and as you've heard in the conversations, as you've heard in the chat, this is, I'm so affirmed in presenting this information to you and hearing people say, this is who we are as coaches. This is where we want to be. This is where we want not only ourselves to be, but to help our clients move in this direction towards, again, you know, love and dignity and humanity. So it might surprise you, you know, all good ICF coaches understand our coaching competencies, that principled struggle aligns very well with the current ICF competencies. So again, on your screen, hopefully you're seeing the presentation. We've got principled struggle and the concepts: be honest and direct while holding compassion, take responsibility for your own feelings and actions, seek deeper understanding and ask and read first, consider this may or may not be the container to hold what you may or may not need to bring, side conversations should help us get to better understanding, not check out. And so as you look at the ICF competencies, you know, one of the things we want to, setting the foundation, and so this is my mistake. The one I left off here is meeting the ethical, number one, is A1, meeting the ethical guidelines and professional standards of our industry. We have just, as an association, updated our code of ethics. And in that code of ethics, there is a definition, and there's one definition of equality. Mm-hmm. And it talks about inclusion and access to resources and opportunities. Well, this is exactly what we're talking about. And the other definition I was very excited to see was systemic equality. And ICF defines that as gender equality, race equality, and other forms of equality that are institutionalized in the ethics, core values, policies, structures, and cultures of communities, organizations, nations, and societies. So it's a part of our charge as coaches to consider how the dignity and humanity is being impacted, and to embrace these ideas of principled struggle. So the second, be establishing the coaching agreement. You know, when we are talking about the ability to understand what is required and coming to an agreement with the prospective and new client about coaching process and relationships, principled struggle is all about this relationship, this give and take, this respecting the client's life world perspective, as well as views, as well as boundaries around what is and is not a part of the coaching engagement. So what is appropriate in the relationship and what is not, as well as an effective match between his and her coaching method and the needs of the prospective client. So oftentimes when we're talking about establishing the coaching agreement, we tend to want to talk about our needs as coaches to have the right kind of client. But establishing this coaching agreement really is a relationship. It's a creation, an agreement. It's a co-creation between the client and the coach. And then we also want to talk about B, which is co-creating the relationship. Number 3 is establishing trust and intimacy with the client. And so you're talking about a safe, supportive environment that produces ongoing mutual respect and trust, demonstrating respect for the client's perspectives, learning style, and personal being, and that a coach is providing ongoing support for and champions new behaviors and actions, including those involving risk-taking and fear of failure. So I see there's a lot. I'm going to leave trust Marlo to let me know if there's something in the chat that we need to address in the moment.
You're good. You're good.
And then active listening. Let's see. Number 4 is the coaching presence, communicating effectively. Number 5 is active listening. Yeah, I was stressing Lee about these slides. It's fantastic. Thank you, Lee, so much for the work that you did. I'm noticing all my mistakes here. Active listening is the 5th competency, and it's focused completely on what the client is saying and is not saying to understand the meaning of what is said in the context of the client's desires and the support the client's self-expression. So as coaches, how are we skilling up so that we are not only aware of what is the client's expression, but also able to hold space for clients that may have different experiences from us? Or how do we hold space for clients that are having experiences that pull something up for us that may not be helpful to the coaching relationship? And it goes back to number 7, direct communication. Using language that has the greatest positive impact on the client. What are we saying that we don't recognize that we are saying to a client that is experiencing these realities? So direct communication is about clear, articulate, and direct, being clear, articulate, and direct in sharing positive feedback, reframing and articulates to help the client understand from another perspective what he or she wants or is uncertain about. And then again, using language appropriate and respectful to the client, non-sexist, non-racist, non-technical, non-jargon. Facilitating learning and results is number 8, creating awareness. And one of the competencies that I highlighted was communicates broader perspectives to clients and inspires commitment to shift their viewpoints and find new possibilities for action, as well as helps the client discover for themselves the new thoughts, beliefs, perceptions, emotions, moods, etc., that strengthen their ability to take action and achieve what is important to them. And then we're also talking about designing action. And if I am going over, this was not intended to be all of the competencies that connect with principled struggle. And I'm inviting you, if you know of another competency that has come to your mind, to share it in the chat so that we can talk about that as well. But in designing actions, which is the 9th competency, you're talking about brainstorming and assisting the client to define actions that will enable the client to demonstrate practice and deepen new learning. And then 9.6 is to challenge the client's assumptions and perspectives to provoke new ideas and find new possibilities for action. And then advocates or brings forward points of view that are aligned with the client's goals and without attachment engages the client to consider them. And then encourages and stretches and challenges, but also a comfortable pace of learning. So these are the current ICF competencies that are available on the ICF Global website, and they're intertwined. The concepts of principled struggle, as you can see, are intertwined throughout these competencies. I also wanted to note that the competency model has been updated and will go into effect. A new model is going, an updated model is going into effect in 2021. So, oh, Marlo is awesome. Thank you. So let's talk. I'm going to toss it back over to Joyce.
Yeah.
To talk about what's next.
Yes, thank you, Adrienne, for sharing the competencies. And I think this is a nice segue because, you know, we talk about designing action, and it's been such a rich conversation today. So, you know, again, as Adrienne shared, please feel free to continue to share your thoughts in the chat, as well as, so right now we're actually going to transition on how ICF DC Metro can support coaches as we move forward, enter into this principal struggles. And I believe, Adrienne, you mentioned in the beginning that, again, this was supposed to be a segue to a conversation, and there's going to be more conversations that we hope that are going to take place after this. So, so as we talk about the next steps, I'm going to share actually, which is the next steps. And please feel free to share. Please feel free to share what you're thinking. ICF Metro DC will actually be convening next, I believe maybe the next month, and they're going to figure out how can we continue this conversation. In addition to that, we will obviously want to talk about how do we build our skills and coaches in being able to address this concept of principal struggle. So that's going to be the next step. And I believe, Adrienne, do you have anything else to add from
Sure.
Yes,
so
Metro?
What we wanted to do is to think about how we can continue this conversation. And so we want to identify what building our skills in principled struggle might look like, and how do we begin to measure our ability to do this concept. And Carolyn had a question. She says, the speaker talked about recognizing the power based on race and gender in a coaching relationship. Which competency does recognizing power fall into? So,
we'll get back to you on that. No.
I went into coaching mode, and I was like, well, let's explore this. Like,
so somebody says direct communication.
That's just tossing it out to the group.
Yes.
Direct communication, absolutely. Yeah. And where else do you see this dynamic of power, which isn't explicitly mentioned in our coaching competencies, but where do you see it showing up? LC Roke says, I could see another CCE on powerful questioning around this. Absolutely. It's when I was going through trying to pick out some of them, I was just like, all of them. In the workplace, it's not just diverse, race, gender, what questions might work, especially where there's not the client or not. I'm not sure.
Especially where the client, it's not on the client's radar.
Yeah.
Where diversity and race and gender inequities or inequality.
Oh, for example. Okay, thank you. And
Yeah.
then Catherine says coaching agreement and contracting. LC is also, while honoring the partnership of coaching, maybe co-creating the relationship competency. Thank you, Carolyn. I absolutely agree with that. Active listening, says Laura. Considering the context, identity, environment, experiences, and values and beliefs. And then Mamie says, coaching is about building self-awareness. That would include awareness of power dynamics, contributes to blind spots.
So true.
The brilliance coming from our
Yes.
chapter. That's absolutely.
Great.
And I'm really excited that you guys are seeing this and are interested in that. So our question then becomes, the beautiful thing about International Coaching Week is it is coming at a time when we are, we'll come back to the resources in just a second. It's coming at a time where we will be talking about what's next. So we want to hear from you. Like, tell us what you're getting out of this in the chat. If you'd like to ask a question, if you want to raise your hand, we can even, if you want to raise your hand, I believe we can unmute you and have you share a bit if you don't want to type in the chat. But what would you like, where would you like to see this conversation go from here? What questions do you have about what we've shared today?
I'll tell my story if you put questions in the chat box.
Okay, Catherine Snyder, I love Mamie's idea of power dynamics awareness offering. I'd like to see the conversation go towards how a coach can continually be disciplined to explore their own experience, unconscious bias, etc. Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
What else would you like to see? We're going to share this information with you. We're going to share the resources. But if we were to continue this conversation as a chapter, what other questions do you have? What piqued your interest about this? What is something that you don't agree with, or something that you think needs further explanation? Let's see.
Yeah. Laura said she'd like to have a community to share the discussion as it evolves. Coaching is often a solitary activity, and we will need each other to grow and evolve here. Mary said opportunities to provide pro bono coaching to help those working in this area.
I think that's great.
Yes, absolutely. Ellen says our ability to explore through questioning is our greatest advantage, modeling curiosity and vulnerability. I do think having deeper experiences and resources on power and race would be helpful. Maybe the ability to practice with each other. That's an excellent suggestion also. Manny says, given that very little has changed in the last 50 years since Dr. King, can coaching help create a new way for principal struggle that actually yields results in the next 50 years or sooner, preferably say next 5 to 10?
I like
perhaps,
the way you think.
I do too. Perhaps a program for clients who are interested in confidentially exploring this space. See more about interracial coaching. Terry said, Carmela said the role of identity and how it shapes values and assumptions.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the point where I remember to ask you to enter into the chat. How was this valuable? How was this conversation useful for you? Our president, the president of our chapter, Jim Sims, has invited us to share. If you can share in the chat, you can also email Jim, and let's see, his email is, and I'm trusting somebody is putting it into the chat.
I gotcha.
Jim@turningpathsolutions.com. Again, our chapter is heading into a strategic planning conversation in a few weeks. And part of the thing that I've been encouraging us to do is to take the conversations from International Coaching Week, where there are follow-on conversations, where there is, there's
look
Jim.
at Jim. How are you going to show your presidential power there? He's like,
email your thoughts, many things. What's the most important thing that the board of the ICF Metro DC chapter can do for you? And whether it is related to this or not, we can certainly email Jim at turningpathsolutions.com. They're scrolling too fast, Marlo. Can you catch
I know, right? Yeah. I was, so then more awareness building around these concepts could expand and deepen the conversation, then survey coaches for specific needs and examples we could share with each other. The role of identity and how it shapes values, I think we did that one. No idea how to answer this, but could post-COVID world be different? What is the opportunity for opportunity here for coaching and principal struggle? Jim gave his information. Number one on Mamie's question and in IRL discussion, learning cohorts. How staying curious leads to expanded awareness and widening of perspectives. Reminded me the struggle continues and I can play a role as a coach to change things. This was very helpful. I'm particularly interested in exploring power dynamics. How does it show up in coaching? Very valuable. We need so much more about how to bridge the identity differences among us and between us and our clients in the context of powerful coaching. Include more of these provocative conversations and presentations and webinars. This is valuable. How often are these topics part of ICF Metro DC or ICF overall? It introduced me to principal struggle. I helped with restorative justice programs. However, I like the larger concept of principal struggle. Opportunity to practice in a safer space for coaches. Identifying one's own blind spots, thinking about what's directly front and center that one may not take into consideration. This has been tremendously valuable in as much as it has grounded me in some of my more core beliefs, strengths, and areas for growth. It has also allowed me to draw parallels between this topic and the competencies that come up in non-related coaching experiences. This is like all the stuff that we wanted to hear. Like, this is great. This provided more awareness and learning about principal struggles. Very valuable. Kudos to those who put it together. I'm going to put on my glasses and quit trying to be cute. Invitation to go beyond identity. Identity equals limitation, not liberation. Adrienne, someone suggested in the chat exploring this topic further in a community of practice. Could this fit in the nascent social identity COP, or if we go the COP route, a wholly separate COP? And that's Mr. President there. So yeah.
Absolutely. And we're open to all these possibilities. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yes.
So we are, and please continue to share as we are bubbling through this. We have a few minutes left. We do have time for questions, but I also want to share some additional resources. So if we could, is that Joyce, do you have, who's got control of the screen? If we can put the resources. So along, our intention for today was really to introduce principled struggle as we practiced principled struggle with each other. And I am so thankful for all of you for showing up, for participating, for being challenged, for being honest, for being vulnerable, for embracing this concept. One of the principles of struggle is to seek deeper understanding, to ask and read first. So again, Charlene's book is fantastic. I have read it. I have thought it was fantastic. I'm so glad that she had the chance to talk to us, but I also wanted to share some additional resources. So, and someone in the chat talked about how this is not a new concept, and someone else asked about the global perspective. So I wanted to share two additional resources for you. The first one is a book that was written collectively by women from the Students Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and it's called Hands on the Freedom Plow, and they're personal accounts by the women in SNCC. This is a tremendous story about the voices. We often hear about the struggle for freedom, but but oftentimes we hear from the leaders of the movement, not necessarily the people who were moving the movement. So this is a tremendous resource. It is direct accounts from the women who were students in SNCC and what their experiences were like and what they've decided to share with us about their experiences. So that's an opportunity to hear more voices and hear a broader perspective of the research of the history that led to Charlene's book, Unapologetic. I also want to expand this into a global conversation around identity. And so there is a tremendous, this is a documentary that was created, and it is called Footprints of Pan-Africanism. Mm-hmm. And it is a documentary by Shrigyana Ania. Yes. She is a filmmaker in her own right. She is also the wife of filmmaker Haile Gerima. They are here in the DC area. They have been for years. They actually operate the Sankofa Bookstore that is right on Georgia Avenue within DC. I thought this was a wonderful opportunity, again, in practicing principled struggle, to encourage you as we send out these slides to visit sankofa.com to purchase Charlene's book, Hands on the Freedom Plow, or even get a copy of the DVD. Sankofa is a wonderful resource. They do have an online bookstore. And again, this is an opportunity to, there are hundreds of titles available through Sankofa if you are looking to deepen your knowledge around this topic. So
we have a couple of comments, Adrienne. Sure. I want to, Jim, I think Leah's going to open your mic or unmute you. You may need to unmute yourself so that you can speak. Jim raised his hand there you go, Jim.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I did intentionally raise my hand. I simply put that note in the chat. So I do have a little thank you note ready to send, but this has been wonderful. So no, I don't have anything else to add to this wonderful and dynamic discussion. Thank you all.
Well, thank you. It was good to hear your voice, Jim. Okay.
Okay, the other question was, Adrienne, what is ICF's framework to identify power dynamics on race and gender as a coaching topic? Is that we'll follow back up?
That's a great question. But again, this is, our conversation today was to introduce you to this concept. Our conversation today as a chapter was to talk about this concept and to begin the conversation. We're so glad that our chapter leadership was here. We're so glad that our ICF Global Thought Leader joined us today. We intentionally made sure that these leaders of your community were invited to this so that we could see what you thought of this. You could have come forward and said, we don't want to talk about this. This is not relevant. And so we're looking forward to seeing where this goes from here, and we're looking forward to having you help co-create that path.
And then the other question, which I believe the answer is yes, people want to connect with you all on LinkedIn. So I'm just going to put your LinkedIn profiles in here.
Yeah, Marlon, okay. I think I just did.
You did yours?
I'm gonna do.
Oh, I just saw Joyce where you did. Okay, so Adrienne, I'll just put yours in there.
Yeah, if you search Adrienne Fikes or Soul Power Coach, you'll find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah. This was really great, and I know a lot of people asked about that international aspect of it, and gender and equality and diversity and inclusion, because that's a big topic in the international industry. Again, NGOs and international development industry. So we would love to have more conversations about that.
So before you go, we're going to ask you one more time to enter something in the chat to say what your thoughts about this was, what you got out of it. Thank you, Linda. Great. We're so glad you all decided to join us. Just to share some final thoughts as we close out this conversation. And while you're sharing your thoughts, I just have to say thank you so much to, again, Joyce for your brilliant facilitation, for Marlo for holding down the chat. You know, we've got another minute if you still want to tell your story. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with both of you. Thank you for bringing this to the chapter.
We still have 2 minutes. All of you are evil. I just want all of you. Somebody just put in the chat. Marla, we still have 2 minutes. Hit. Okay, I'm going to face it. The short of it is that I was on a diversity panel that was designed to talk about the full spectrum of diversity. And someone mentioned making sure that you check with organizations to see if their websites are ADA compliant. And so I just continued to listen, and I thought, well, I'm not sure exactly what they're talking about. And then someone asked, and they said, well, you know, making sure that people who are visually impaired are able to peruse your website. And so I was like, well, excuse me, if they're visually impaired, how are they going to be on the website? Like, what are they? And it was at that moment that I realized my privilege, because I have eyesight. So it's nothing to me. I think nothing about it. My website is not ADA compliant. I never gave consideration to that. And Marlene is saying, Marlo, you promised. Marlene, I'll deal with you offline. You know, I just, and so the point is that in our best of intentions, here I was sitting on a diversity panel, and I was doing harm by my privilege unintentionally. And so it's just the point of that we all can make serious mistakes.
You know what, Marlo, you have just put the perfect continuous learning, none of us are finished with this, bow on this entire experience. Thank you so much for your vulnerability and for your openness. Thank you for sharing that wonderful story with us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. You know, this has been so much fun. I hope that you learned a lot. I hope that you were global. Alicia from Global says sharing is caring. You know, thank you so much. Again, to our ICF committee, we hope you will join us tomorrow for our conversation about assessments. It is 11 a.m. tomorrow. Please go to icfmetrodc.org to sign up if you have not. Fantastic panel. Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Have a good afternoon.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Fantastic. Yay. You too.
I know. Awesome. We had.
No one will ever ask me to be on a diversity panel.
You're not being invited. You're not being invited, Marlo.
Be invited. They're going to say no. Bye, guys.
As a coach in training, it's exciting that this conversation. Oh, these are fantastic. I can't wait to read the comments. Thank you, Lee.
They were great. Thank you, Lee. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. All right. Have a great afternoon.